childhood and like your upbringings, where you came from?
My name is Gabriel. I grew up in, I'm actually not from New York City. I grew up in Connecticut, where I had been living since the age of 7.
Okay.
I originally came from Ecuador. I was born in Quito, Ecuador, and I came with my parents at the age of 7. It was my mom, my dad, and my younger brother, who was 3 at the time. So we immigrated to Connecticut. We lived in my uncle's basement for a while. And actually, no, originally we lived in a bedroom, a spare bedroom that he had. It was the 4 of us. Actually, it was the 4 of us originally, but my mom had a baby here, my younger sister, and then a year later she had my younger brother. So I have 3 siblings, 1 girl and 2 boys, and 2 are American citizens. So I grew up undocumented. That's the term that we tend to use. It's a more favorable term. I grew up undocumented. I've been undocumented for the past 17 years. But last 2 years ago, in December of 2010, my family filed an application to adjust immigration status. My uncle, who's an American citizen, filed on behalf of my mother. And are you guys familiar with how the immigration process works, the path to legalization sometimes?
No, not really. Somewhat.
I'll give you a little overview. It's very difficult for someone to adjust their immigration status. Usually when people hear, when in the media, in politics, people who are generally anti-immigrant, they always have this concept that get in the back of the line. That's what they'll tell immigrants, especially undocumented immigrants, get in the back of the line. But there's really no line. It's very difficult for someone who is from Mexico. I was born in Ecuador. Someone who is Ecuadorian, someone who's Guatemalan, to file, even for a visa, to even visit this country, it's very difficult. So there are not many options for someone to immigrate to this country legally. Visas are regularly denied. There's also the issue of money. You have to keep refiling and paying money. It's very difficult, travel expenses and all that, to file on a plane. So what ultimately people resort to is immigrating by foot, or sometimes overstaying their visa, as me and my family did. We overstayed our visa. So it's very difficult to adjust one's immigration status after you either overstay your visa, or if you immigrate to the U.S. via the Mexican border. If someone crosses the Mexican border into the U.S., that's entering the U.S. without inspection, which is not allowed. So that's an unauthorized entry into the U.S. So someone who crosses the border from Mexico into the U.S. is not allowed to adjust their immigration status, even if they marry an American citizen, even if their children are born in this country, and once they turn 21, they would normally be able to file a petition on behalf of their parents, but having crossed the Mexican border, they're not able to do that. People who overstay their visa, like in my case, they can file for a petition to adjust immigration status if they marry an American citizen. Also, my siblings who are American citizens could have filed on behalf of my mother and father at the age of 21. So right now, my oldest sister is 17. So my parents would have to wait until 21 for them to adjust their immigration status. In my case, and in the longest case, it's citizens who file petitions on behalf of their siblings. Like for instance, my uncle, he filed a petition on behalf of my mother, which takes very long. In our case, it took 10 years. It's actually, we're on our 11th year, and right now I'm in transitional status, where I'm not undocumented, but I'm not a legal resident. I haven't received my green card yet. It's called the green card. So I'm in that transitional status where before I couldn't work, before I couldn't have a driver's license, I couldn't do many things. I couldn't travel via airplane. And so I'm in that transitional stage where I'm not a legal resident yet, so I can't travel outside of the country, or else it would be very difficult for me. And also, I can't travel outside of the country, but I can work legally, which is a great thing, but it expires. So there's the catch. Yeah, so that's basically an overview of how someone can adjust their immigration status. Especially for Mexican immigrants, it's an entirely more difficult process than what me and my family went to. For instance, if someone crosses the Mexican border, like I mentioned, they cannot file a petition to adjust their immigration status. And if someone were to file a petition on behalf of a Mexican citizen for them to come to this country, it would take 15 years or more, 15 to 20 years to immigrate legally to this country. So you're thinking about the conditions that people in these countries like Mexico, Ecuador, Guatemala, and other Central American countries, even outside India and China, people don't want to wait that long, And if it's so easy, what are some factors that you think lead people to immigrate to this country?
Economic opportunity.
Yeah.
Economic opportunity.
Education.
Mm-hmm. How about jobs? Are jobs accessible in this country? That's usually what brings people here, the relatively ease to have a job, even though it's low paying and it's called under the table working. But there's employers out there, even in the city, that hire undocumented immigrants willingly as a form of cheap labor. So that's the magnet that attracts a lot of immigrants. These opportunities where even though they're making what we would consider low wages, they're making so much more than they would have in their home countries. So having a job here, even though they're not allowed to work legally here, and even with a low-paying job, they have enough money to send back to their country to educate their children, to provide for their families over there, to provide health care. So I've met a lot of people, and that's what they do. They have these jobs where they're restaurant cooks, other positions, and they send their money back to their home countries like Mexico, Ecuador, and Guatemala. They pretty much don't spend any money on themselves, and they're working like 12 hours per day, just sending all that money because they really want to improve, not for themselves, but for their children. They want to provide a good education for their children and more opportunities for their children who may not even be necessarily in this country.
Do you remember anything before you came to New York?
I do. I had a very big family.
Mm-hmm.
I have it's probably more, but at one time I think we counted up to 21 cousins. My mom has, and just on my mother's side, my mom has 5 siblings. She has 5 siblings, and then all those cousins, my aunts and uncles, they all live in Ecuador. And then on my father's side, he had 3 siblings and their family, and I haven't seen them in 17 years. It's actually very funny because I remember the day that I left Ecuador, and my whole family, all my relatives were waving us goodbye at the airport, so they came, and then there's pictures of us, me and my father, and I'm probably like this high at the age of 7, and all my family's there. And I remember my youngest cousin at the time, who was 1 year old. He was 1 year, and he was there, and my aunt, his mother, was carrying him in her arms. And it's so funny, I haven't been in that country for so long, 17 years. You start to make your own life here, and you don't really think about people back home, even though they miss you. They miss my face and the little boy that they remember, especially my grandmother. But it's such a strange place to be because I basically grew up in this country, so I don't really have that much of a recollection, and I don't miss them so willingly. I'd love to see them again, but it's so funny because my cousin was staying with us up until last week, and he's now 18, I think. Yeah, he's 18 years old, if not going on 19, and he's like so much taller than me. And it's just so funny to see a picture of that, like a memory that I remember that day being in the airport, having that memory of my little cousin who can't even walk, and now he's 18 years old. And it's very strange. So I haven't been back in Ecuador. I hope that I can in the future. But it's just going to be very strange to see all my cousins and all my aunts.
What is it like not being able to travel back to Ecuador? do you feel about that?
It's very difficult. I grew up in this country, but I didn't know much about Ecuador. Just stories that I heard from my parents. But I didn't really know that much about the history, about the culture, what it's like, because I was very young. So the only recollection that I have is of my time at home, spending weekends in my grandmother's house, my cousins, my school, and all that. I had to go to a military school, and I had a little uniform. I thought it was so funny that I had to wear like a little uniform and a little hat, a military hat. But since I didn't grow up in this country, I don't know what that's like. And so it's only here that it's kind of interesting that in the past couple of years, there's been connections that are blurred between countries, so you can talk with someone in another country via Skype. It's very easy, or you can communicate via Facebook. You can see all these pictures and emails, and you can communicate pretty frequently. And also you learn a lot. And in the past couple of years, I feel like I've been denied that part of my heritage because I grew up here, especially. So I don't know much about the culture. So I've been looking into it and seeing what the country's like, researching history, seeing what the economics, the politics are like, planning a trip for when I return. And it's a very beautiful country. And this I can tell you from just what I've learned is there's the Amazon, which is in the west. I'm from the mountains, so it's very high mountains. Some of the tallest mountains, the tallest volcano in the world. A colonial city, very well preserved, very beautiful. There's also a little rainforest preserve not too far from there. There's also beaches, the Galapagos Islands. It's a very diverse country, and I would love to go back and visit them.
You mentioned talking like about school, and you went to military school, and you also learned here in the United States. What's the difference between learning in Ecuador and the United States?
It's so funny because I even have that memory of having a military uniform and the hat, and it just everything seeming so strict. So when I got here, I enrolled in the second grade in a school in Connecticut. But I remember very vividly my first year experience and my kindergarten experience back in Ecuador. And they treat you like a little adult. That's how I thought, because like we were learning body parts and about the solar system, like all in kindergarten in the first grade, and we would get assignments every day. It's very interesting. So when I was enrolled in second grade, I was like, wow, this seems really childish, because the way they treat you is more like an adult, and all these responsibilities that they place on you.
It's good for you to